The offseason is a time for many football fans where things come to a halt almost and news is sparse. But when people start making their own news, that's when things have crossed a line. And this offseason, I'm quite frankly going to say it, it's gotten old. We're going to talk about it, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. Folks, most of this offseason, much of the conversation as far as what the Lions should or shouldn't do, much of what the Lions, have in mind or should have in mind, has been centered around this conversation of trades. Now, I understand. During the offseason, there's not a whole hell of a lot to talk about. It gets very hard to come up with news, especially when things are sparse, especially when there's not a whole hell of a lot going on that's related to your team. But if we go back to this offseason, I would say almost 75 to 80% of the conversation has surrounded the fact of who the Lions should be looking for to trade in terms of a player. Now, usually this conversation has been in the form of trading for some type of a prominent edge rusher, such as guys like Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, or even Trey Hendrickson. Most, if not all of those ideas, have gone completely belly up or way of the dodo bird for the most part, because now most people have come to the realization of the fact that, that's simply not going to happen. It's not something that, we should be expecting, and most people have now kind of disregarded the notion of trading for any type of a big name player now that the draft is at this point, literally less than a week away. However, the issue now is not what players the Lions should be trying to go out and trade for, but rather now the issue when we're having this conversation is what players they are supposedly thinking about trading away. Now, like I've said, I get it. The offseason, news is sparse. You're not going to find a whole lot to talk about because realistically, the only thing worth talking about between, when the offseason starts and then when it ends, when training camp and all that stuff gets going again, is really the draft and obviously free agency. And the Lions have not exactly been huge, spenders in free agency this year. They only made really one big move, and when it happened, it was a talking point for about a week or so, and that was about it. Most of it just kind of went dark again. In fact, most of the conversation this offseason has been rather dark from a lot of people because they're like, because the Lions haven't done this, it's just not good. But I just got something simply to tell everybody. When you start having people coming up with these narratives, creating quote-unquote rumors about who the Lions should trade away, that's just simply irresponsible and it's reckless. I'm just going to be honest. The idea of creating news just to generate views or clicks is by far simply one of the foolhardiest things to do. Most fans during this time are looking for things to talk about rather than there being an abundance of things in which people can provide multiple perspectives or viewpoints from. So it's like, hey, in the off season, as a podcaster, it is your job to find ways to be creative without necessarily creating something that is completely ridiculous. But when you start generating news or you start generating things just because you have to have something to talk about because you can't think of anything else, I'm sorry. That's just simply not condonable. It's something where I just sit back and I'm like, Really? Is this the best we can do? Is this seriously what we have been reduced to? Is somebody coming up with, ridiculous thought processes, rumors, ideas, and this is what we have to listen to for the next couple of months? I just sit back and I'm just like, really? Really? This is what we have to listen to. This is what we are reduced to. Now, what exactly am I talking about? Mostly, I'm talking about supposed rumors that are circulating or have been circulated for a while about, the Lions potentially wanting to use players as trade bait either prior or during or maybe even after the draft. Now, which players fall into this category? Well, there are three. The three players that we're talking about here are QB Hen Hooker, wide receiver Jameson Williams, and cornerback Amik Robertson. Now, I'm going to be honest. The idea that any of these players would be considered trade bait is laughable. I mean, just absolutely laughable. And it should not be considered from the person who's pushing the idea to be a very serious narrative. In fact, it should be considered like something that, in an act of desperation, they just decided to come up with because, hey, we ain't got nothing better to come up with. And that's where I truly lose it. I truly just have had enough of people saying, because there's nothing really to talk about, because we can't create or push the creative boundary to try and come up with something better, we're going to go for the lowest hanging fruit in essence, and we're going to come up with something just absolutely ridiculous. But when I've heard as much as I have, I'm sorry. I've just simply had enough. I've had freaking enough of it. And I feel there's a responsibility to fight back and provide some sense and reason to this absolute mockery of podcasting journalism. Now, let's first start with quarterback Hen Hooker. I understand that there are, for some people, this has become a bit of a sore spot for them. Because Hooker has simply just not met the expectations that some fans have had for him when he was drafted. And I'm going to be honest. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I tried to warn y'all. I sincerely tried to give everybody the best possible viewpoint based upon the information that was available. Because I was like, listen, based upon what information we have, based upon what Hooker is not, based upon what Goff is not, this is what we're looking at. And after taking a look at that and providing the, reason and logic that I gave, I got told by quite a lot of people that I was a hater, that I didn't like Hen Hooker because of the fact of, some went so far as to say it was because of his race, which I absolutely vehemently deny because I am not a racist. I have no problem with anybody who plays the quarterback position. But if you're going to play the quarterback position, you need to be actually able to play the quarterback position at a freaking NFL level. And I tried to warn people about this, and a lot of people didn't like what I had to say. They refused to listen to me. Because I'll be honest, the people that I'm explicitly talking about, they saw the drafting of Hooker as pretty much the time on Jared Goff's clock as the Lions quarterback had or was about to run out. And I'm sorry, I knew for a fact that was not going to happen. But the point of the matter is that when you take a look at the whole situation as I presented it back then, I'll represent it now. The Lions and Brad Holmes were never going to replace Goff with a 25-year-old rookie coming out of college from a non-pro style system or pro style offense and who was coming off of a serious injury from a non-contact play. It just wasn't going to happen. And as I stated back then, and again, I'll reiterate it now, there was no way that with that, the Lions were going to hand the reins off to freaking, Hen Hooker to be the franchise guy because he hasn't even shown now, much less back then, that he could effectively learn the system. Because think about it, when we first drafted Hen Hooker, he couldn't even practice for the majority of the time. He had to sit on the sideline and watch. And he didn't even actually start practicing until he was close to 26 years old. It would have been absolutely suicidal for the Lions to make that decision of replacing Goff with Hooker. Especially with how top-notch Goff has himself been playing. Since the Lions drafted Hooker back in 2023, Goff has been unequivocally one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And there's absolutely no doubt about that. In fact, I'm going to go even so much further to say this. Ever since that happened, Goff has been the best quarterback in Lions history opposite of Bobby Lane. In fact, you take a look at what Goff has been able to do in that time frame. Since 2023, Goff has had the second best completion percentage out of all quarterbacks. He's got the most passing yards. In fact, he's got 660 more than the next closest person. He's got the third highest passing average. He has the second most passing touchdowns. He has the fourth highest passing touchdown percentage per throw. He has the 10th lowest pass interception percentage per throw. He's actually tied for 10th. He's tied for second when it comes to passer rating. And he has the most wins of any quarterback in that time frame in the regular season. He's got two more than the second best person. So think about this. When a quarterback is performing at that high of a level, that damn good, there's no way in hell that any coach or GM in their right mind is going to replace that quarterback. And that's exactly what the Lions decided against doing. And they cemented it when they rewarded Goff with a 4-year, $212 million extension. One, that Goff, even though the contract extension doesn't start until officially this year. Think about that. The contract doesn't actually start until either it started last year or it starts this year. I can't remember which one. But the whole point is that Goff has played definitely up to what that contract is supposed to be for, a top 5 quarterback. Because, as I just demonstrated with the stats, he's played at that level. So the idea of Hooker ever supplanting Goff was DOA, dead on arrival. It wasn't going to happen. But then people kind of moved off that and said, oh, well, Hen Hooker's now going to become the backup quarterback. He'll learn, he'll progress, he'll develop. Well, here's the thing. As we all know, Hooker couldn't even be the backup quarterback at first because, again, he was overcoming that injury. But once he became healthy, then it became actually a chance for him to get into that backup role. The problem is that while he couldn't play the backup role, we had Teddy Bridgewater. And then obviously, as we know, 2024 comes along. He gets the backup role. He earns it. He gets it. And then all of a sudden, Teddy Bridgewater comes back after, finishing the promise of what he said he wanted to do, which was to go to his high school and win a state championship there. But really where the issue became a problem, where this whole concept I'm talking about really blew up, was when in the playoffs, when Goff got that nasty hit and had to go out to get checked for a concussion, the Lions did not put in Hooker. They put in Teddy Bridgewater. And many people looked at that as the Lions saying, oh, we have no confidence in Hooker. Really? Really? That's where you're going with that. Could it possibly have been that, okay, it's a divisional playoff round, we're trying to advance to the championship game, who should we put in? Should we put in a guy who, quite frankly, Hen Hooker, the only time he's played in the NFL, as far as in meaningful games, has been in unmeaningful situations? Think about it. The only time that Hen Hooker has ever stepped on a football field to play has been in garbage time. Because unless the Lions have been up by 40 or something points, the Lions don't put Hen Hooker out there. They don't put any of their backup quarterbacks out there. So unless the Lions are up by 40-something points, Hen Hooker's not seeing the field. And even when he has seen the field, most of the time he's just handing the damn ball off. I mean, what makes more sense? You're going to give the job to go into the playoff game for the very first time ever in his career to a guy that has barely had any sort of meaningful snaps in a football game? Or are you going to give it to a guy who used to be a starting quarterback, has played in playoff games? Which makes more sense? I'm sorry, giving the job and putting in the backup who's actually experienced in the job that you need him to do, that makes more sense. Not just because, oh, well, we drafted this kid in the 3rd round, we've got to make sure we put him out there, otherwise it doesn't look like we're doing anything. That's just ludicrous. That's just ridiculous. So, I understand why people have the viewpoint that they do, but again, the viewpoint that, oh, now because people are thinking that the Lions have no confidence in Hooker, they need to trade him to get some sort of compensation back for drafting him in the 3rd round, is purely ridiculous. What did Brad Holmes say that draft? He said, we want to add to the quarterback room to address the backup quarterback situation. And they've done that. Hooker is likely the best option the Lions are going to have for this role going forward because, one, he's now been in the system for a couple of years. Second, his contract is perfect in the sense that he doesn't cost the Lions a hell of a lot. And third, unless Teddy Bridgewater decides to come back and play another comeback, so to speak, of which there's no guarantee, would you honestly prefer the idea of Kyle Allen taking snaps in Goff's absence? I'm going to say this, unless Kyle Allen unequivocally outperforms frickin' Hooker in both the preseason and training camp, I know I sure wouldn't. Point is, the Lions are in a good spot with their quarterback situation, both the starting and the backup role. I see no reason on God's green earth why they would suddenly change course and give up on Hooker when Hooker has not done anything wrong except to continue to develop, which is exactly what Campbell said his job was in the first place. That's player number 1. Player number 2. The second player that has now been labeled as a potential trade bait target is Jameson Williams. And again, I'm sorry, this is just absolutely asinine. Absolutely asinine. J-Mo, regardless of whatever personal feelings that fans may or may not have against him, he's a special player, and the Lions recognize that. Furthermore, the Lions would be absolutely nuts to move off of him after all the time and resources that they've pumped into him. And on top of that, the results that he's now put out on the field. But why else are people even considering this idiocy? It's based on the facts that some people think that, one, the Lions have brought in a wide receiver for a pre-draft visit, and it's due to the incoming, or impending cap decisions that are coming up. Now, I'm going to talk about the cap issue later. But first, let's consider this. Why would the Lions get rid of Jameson Williams, first and foremost, after the year he just had, which I would call his breakout campaign? You take a look at what Jameson Williams did last year. He had the 25th most receptions. He had the 25th most targets. He had the 21st most receiving yards. He was number 1 in the NFL in terms of average per catch. He was tied 10th in terms of receiving touchdowns. I mean, dude, out of wide receivers, he was playing at a top 25 level. And think about this. There are 32 teams. There are 2 starting receivers for every single team. So wait a minute here. 32 times 2, that's 64. If you think about it, Jameson Williams is playing within the top third of all starting wide receivers. Why in the hell would you all of a sudden want to move off that? Especially when that was just his breakout campaign. Because if you look at those stats, my sincere question is, why would you want to move off a player that clearly just had a stellar season and is likely to have another even better season this upcoming year? To me, anyone that would want to trade a player like that is simply a damn lunatic. J-Mo is literally one of those players that has the ability to change a game with one damn play. He's that good of a player. And I'm sorry, that type of talent, it's special, it's rare, and it's hard as hell to replace. You can have all the problems you want with him as far as his shenanigans or his brush with the law, which, by the way, it was found he didn't actually commit anything wrong because no charges were ever pressed. I can't mind control you there. But if your only gripe is some of the mistakes that he's made in his past, then respectfully, I'm going to ask you to find something else to talk about. Because at that point, you're wasting your breath and you're wasting a lot of people's time. Because that's clearly not what the Lions are looking at. They're looking at how he is as a player. Yeah, his personal stuff has caused some headaches, But has it actually done anything that's really impacted the team? Not really. So, that's player number 2. The third player, cornerback Amik Robertson. Again, honestly, this whole idea just keeps going down it keeps following the path of the Cheshire Cat from freaking Alice in Wonderland. It's wacky and completely illogical. The supposed logic here is that since the Lions have brought in all these other cornerbacks in free agency, and they've been taking a look at several guys during the pre-draft process, that again, somehow they're not committed to Robertson, and that Robertson does no longer have a cemented role on this roster. Okay. Once again, this comes into the thought process of you need to pay attention to what Holmes has been saying. Much like how I said when Goff was going to be the franchise quarterback. Much like how I've said with virtually anything else the Lions have done. You have to pay attention to what the freaking guys in charge are saying. And think about it. What have they been saying? Oh, we want to add depth. We want to add competition. We want to make sure that we don't have a repeat of what happened last year. So wait a minute. You decide to bring in more competition, more backup talent, more depth, but yet somehow everybody that wants to be in this bandwagon wants to think that that's an indicator that somehow we're going to trade Amik Robertson. Especially when Robertson was a pretty damn good cornerback for us last year when, oh, that's right, everybody wants to keep saying the same thing about how our pass rush was absolutely subpar and was pathetic. I mean, I'm sorry. That is pathetic reasoning right there. If that's your argument, I'm sorry, you're not thinking very far. You're not thinking very deep. Because first of all, when you know that what Holmes is trying to do is build depth and wants to make sure that he's got enough players for going forward to have the best roster available, provide the best competition, so that way when you go to training camp, hey, you've actually got already people in the building, so that way they know the system, they can actually compete at a decent level, and hey, if injuries do strike, we're not scrambling to make an emergency plan. That same also holds true for all the pre-draft visits. Again, you want to see what's out there. You want to know what's available. And hey, if you do decide to make a decision to add another cornerback, somebody that you feel can bring more competition, somebody that you feel that can add to the locker room. But even if you decide to do that, that does not mean that all of a sudden Robertson doesn't have a role on this roster. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a spot on this roster. Because again, Holmes has been abundantly clear about wanting to have solid depth. And that's exactly what all these moves and all these different visits indicate. And not that Robertson is all of a sudden on the trade block. And again, much how I demonstrated with JMO, consider his statistical output for last year. Last year, Amik Robertson he was tied for 39th in terms of most completions allowed, tied 26th in most targets against him. He was ranked 12th in completion percentage allowed by a cornerback, ranked 54th in passing yards allowed, ranked 55th in pass average allowed, tied 21st in pass breakups, tied 11th in passing touchdowns allowed, and ranked 31st in passer rating. Now, I know all those rankings are going to make everybody say, well, that's not that very good, David. Well, let's understand something here. There are how many cornerbacks that are on a field at any given time, and there's always at least 2 starters. So again, you have to understand where we're going with this. So how did I come up with this rationale? Well, first and foremost, if you go to PFF and you put it down there that, hey, I want to take a look at cornerbacks that at least met 50% of the highest amount of coverage snaps, which last year was 732 snaps, that's where you get those sets of numbers, which is out of 78 qualifying cornerbacks. Think about all the cornerbacks that play in the NFL. Only 78 cornerbacks last year even met the 50% threshold of 732 snaps. It takes a rather special individual to be able to play that much. And again, think about it. Out of 78, really, Robertson only had 2 really bad rankings. The rest are actually pretty damn solid. So his average, actually, when you take a look at everything, is at 31st. That's a guy that's played in the top 40% of all those cornerbacks that I'm talking about. So to me, to say that a guy who proved he can play at a decent level with no pass rush, again, which everybody's been saying, now all of a sudden you want to trade him based upon a bunch of irreputable ideas in which to create trade rumors, Again, that to me is a simple, gross use of calling something logical, because it's not. It's illogical as hell. So the point is, I don't see the Lions trading any of these guys. Not Hooker, not Jamo, not Robertson. And again, talking about the whole salary cap nonsense here. When part of your argument is based on the notion that, oh, well, the Lions are just not going to have the cap space to go forward and sign guys going forward. Guys like, Branch, Kirby, Hutch, Jamo, da-da-da-da-da-da. Really? Hold on here. Let's back up half a second here. The Lions still have what, like $45-something million in cap space? Almost 50 if I recall correctly. They're probably going to have about 40 to high 30s after the draft is done. So you're trying to tell me that with a high amount of draft capital, a high amount of salary cap, that Brad Holmes cannot somehow feasibly manage the ability to sign these players to, decent contracts. Because, wait a minute here, let me take you back to 2023. The Lions, I think, had, $60 million something in cap space, and they were able to sign Lee McNeil, Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Taylor Decker. I mean, they signed a whole hell of a lot of players to massive contracts. And yet somehow you're trying to tell me that Brad Holmes can't do that again? Oh, ye of little faith. Oh, ye who just want to come up with something just to create a narrative. I'm sorry. This whole idea that the Lions are looking to trade off players because, this reason or that reason, it's a whole bunch of damn malarkey. It's a bunch of people that have nothing better to talk about, and they're bored. And frankly, I've gotten tired of hearing about it. I've gotten tired of people pushing out false narratives and fake news just because they got nothing better. Do your job. Come up with something that is actually constructive. Come up with something that's actually worth viewership time. There's a reason why I have such a hard time in the offseason coming up with stuff. But hey, if I can't think of something, I'm not just going to push out trash on the internet because I got nothing better to do. I'll take the day or 2 or 3 before I push out something. Because I owe it to my viewers. I owe it to viewers that don't watch me on the regular. You guys have earned the right to get good quality content. Not just anything that comes out of my brain and say, well, hey, I can make something out of this. Let's just push it out on the internet because somebody will watch it. No, sir. No, ma'am. Won't do that. Anyway, I've said my piece. So I'm going to end this episode and say, thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage all to watch the next episode. Also encourage all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content I push out. Also want to encourage all, please make sure you share this content, whether you share it on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. Let's continue to help get this community the good quality content and viewership that it needs. And with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the content. I hope it all brought something to your guys' attention. Maybe it was able to speak something that you guys have thought about for a while but were not wanting to talk about, or, nobody was willing to talk about for you. I also hope that whether it's the first time you're watching me or you guys have been watching me forever and a day, you truly enjoyed the content. Also hope you have something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.